Welcome to Father's Ed. My name's Paul Rose. I'm here with my co-host Chris Marchant, and today we're talking about something that's long overdue: the role of dads in those first weeks of parenthood, and what really needs to change for more of us to actually be there. We're joined later in the show by Alex Lloyd Hunter, co-founder of the Dad Shift, a campaign pushing to radically rethink paternity leave in the UK. He's a father, an advocate, and a guy who's asking a very simple but important question: why are we still treating dads like secondary parents? Right now, if you're a new dad in the UK, your statutory leave is 2 weeks, and even that often comes with such a financial hit that many families can't afford to take it. The result? Dads miss out, kids miss out, and mums are left carrying the early load of parenthood largely alone. But it's not just about the policies, although we'll talk plenty about that. It's about the cultural expectations, the messaging we still get from workplaces, media, even our own families. Dads are told to be present, but not too present, to be supportive, but not essential. And what Alex and the Dad Shift are trying to say is enough. That's not how it works anymore. Because the truth is, modern fatherhood looks a lot different than it did a generation ago. Dads today want to be emotionally involved. We want to be partners, not bystanders. But the system hasn't caught up. And if we're serious about equality in parenting, if we're serious about giving our kids the best start possible, then we've got to start with time. Time with our children. Time to learn how to parent. Time to be dads. So today's episode is about that. It's about the gap between what dads want and what they're allowed. It's about the stories we tell ourselves and the ones we pass down. And it's about what needs to change so that future generations of fathers aren't just surviving those 3 a.m. feedings, they're cherishing them. Let's get into it. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
Not too bad actually. Although, as we'll get into once, I'm sure later, is just going through relearning communication at the moment with my amazing wife, who's very, very patient with me. But it's always something that you have to reflect on and improve upon.
Yes, me too. We won't go into it today because I actually think that there's an episode to be had out of the importance of communication with one's partner. Chris and I were saying before this that we've both had instances this week where I think we could have communicated better, which I'm sure everyone listening can relate to. But, you know, when you have busy jobs, young families, lots of other responsibilities, sometimes it's easy to forget how to
There's lots of explanations, and none of them is a good excuse. But it's one of those where you try to learn and improve. So I always like that the Simon Sinek kind of bits about what friendship is, what relationship is. After all, your partner is the person you're growing with, figuratively and literally when it comes to families. So, it's always should be one where you're trying to improve. Don't forget your date nights or these kind of things.
Absolutely.
Let's do better, basically.
Absolutely. So today we have an interview with Alex from the Dad Shift. This is coming out on Friday, the 6th of June. Next week, they have the Dad Strike, the world's first ever Dad Strike. So we'll talk about that a bit later. And obviously the real root cause of that campaign is all around paternity leave. I think one of the things that I was thinking when we realised that this was going to land as our 6th episode was that if we made this entire episode about paternity leave, then that would mean that half of our first 6 episodes were on paternity leave, and that people might start to think, do you guys talk about anything else? So whilst it's really important, I think there's also a wider point there around equality or inequality in parenting. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, because it's something that comes up in the interview. But then also this morning, I was reading the news, or perhaps more accurately, I was reading all the articles and stories there that weren't newsy, because at the moment the news seems really depressing. But there's an article in the Times today from Claire Cohen called "Mums Are Still the Default Parent. Why Do Dads Never Get the Call?" And it says, defaulting to women for every single thing is not only frustrating, it diminishes men's contributions to parenting. And Claire has written this because she recently had a call from the GP about her son, when specifically she had said to them, here's my husband's phone number. He's the one with the baby today. I'm at work, so you need to ring him. And that is just one of many instances we can think of where mums are the default. I then immediately went onto my WhatsApp messages with my wife to see what had happened and try to recall whether that also happened to us when my son had earache back in February. And the messages confirm that they did call her first, even though they know that I'm the one who we obviously both live close to school, but I'm the one who works from home. She is a teacher, so it's more difficult for her to get out of work. She's half an hour away. I'm a 5-minute walk away. And yet they still called her. So that made me think, actually, let's touch upon paternity leave. It's certainly one of the things about parenting that is unequal. But there are so many instances, I think, where mum is the default and we're just putting all the pressure, all the responsibility onto mums when actually we should and could be involving dads. So I want to talk about that. We're going to touch upon workplace. We're going to touch upon healthcare, education, cultural assumptions, consumer products and services, and just cover some of those areas. What our experience has been if we've experienced this ourselves. I'm sure, looking at this list I've got in front of me, I'm sure we have done. Is there anything, Chris, that springs to mind straight away where your wife has just been the default when actually you told someone that they needed to contact you?
I think everybody has that. I mean, my nursery certainly did it. My youngest was born premature, and he had the consequence of that is his lungs took a bit of time to catch up, and so for certainly the first year of his life he was very prone to chest infections. Like bronchitis was our worst ever enemy, and it's something that resolved. Fortunately now he's over 2. They kind of caught up. They're much less common now, but always my wife would get the call first, and I was working remotely like you. But always, regardless, even if she had me once, even if she told him, she'd get the call first. And they'd sometimes be surprised when I picked them up otherwise. It's a strange thing. So when you were going through that list, I was kind of looking at all the bits. And also in the article, she's mentioning, right at the very beginning there, when you start, it's baby of mum's name on the little band that goes around. Dads are not added onto the birth certificate automatically. They're not on the reference document, even if they're present, or in my case I was even active in the first of the birthing processes for my eldest. Just structurally, societally, procedurally, you're always sending the same message of dad's number 2. One of my biggest pet peeves is HR terminology of primary and secondary caregiver, because there's no way of not placing a value judgment into that terminology. We talk about paternity leave a lot, and parental leave and pay, and we did that episode with Jeremy at the Fatherhood Institute, which was really good. But our conversations with him is there's just lots of bits where structurally it's stated front and centre that the care, the support, the priority is on the mum, and that the expectation is that mum will take the lead in almost every way, whilst that wraparound support is provided. And that's part of what the dad shift is about. Is it's not just this one of paternity, it's about this shift of how dads are supported to get involved, but also what they should perceive themselves as being in terms of their own role. It shouldn't be one where you say to just because you may have access to better paternity pay and leave, that you therefore should be more active. It should be a case where that's your default thinking. How do I share the cognitive load? How do I support my partner? How do I get involved in being a parent? And the famous t-shirt of, I'm not babysitting, I'm their dad, kind of sums it up nicely.
Absolutely. So you've touched upon a few of them there. Let's go through them. So first off, workplace inequality, and we'll probably spend the least amount of time on this because Alex is going to talk about this a lot in that interview. And as we've already mentioned, we've already got 2 hours worth of content about workplace inequality. So go back and listen to those episodes if you haven't already. But in the workplace, paternity leave is minimal or unpaid. Shared parental leave rarely taken by dads. Only 2%, I think it is, actually take SPL. It is a terrible policy and really just share, well,
With shared paternity leave, as
shared
Jeremy
maternity
calls
leave.
it. Yeah.
We know that workplaces often assume mums are going to be the primary carers, and that benefits and parental support schemes are often designed for mums in mind, with mums in mind, overlooking dads' needs. So probably not too much more to say on that since we've already covered it. But is there anything you just want to mention quickly there, or is it pretty obvious?
Yeah, it needs to be a little bit of a recognition that times will change. And some of this was actually quite understandable when the policies were first done. So it's a lot of it is just a legacy issue on why a policy was made the original way is not caught up with how the world now is. And example I like to use is, my wife's family is Irish, and my mother-in-law loves to tell this story with the fact that they used to get shops would be in bars, and so when you actually, I think it's mentioned on Clarkson's Farm recently as well, so you'd have shops attached to bars, because once you got your pay, you'd be given a shopping list. You give it to the barman when you went in. They would do the shopping. Yeah, you pay. They do the shopping, give you about the change, and then you could drink with your friends. And it was to stop them from basically spending all the money. And there's like little stories of this. A lot of these policies were quite purposeful in their design, because at that point in time, dads were not expected to be involved. They'd take their wage one in, and they would just not. It would be socially acceptable, if not socially encouraged, for you not to be taking an equal role. And that's why things like parenting out loud is such a big movement, and that kind of one counts. I know you do it, I try to do it as well. But also, when you're at appointments, there's so many bits where, we've talked about it. You're not asked about your mental health and well-being by the health assistant coming to see you. You should, but rarely have I heard any anecdotal evidence of that actually happening.
We're going to talk about healthcare next, so
it's a little bit of jumping the gun there. But yeah, I mean, there are bits where policy and social attitudes haven't caught up, but also fundamentally the big problem with policy in all of this, and we'll do that I'm sure at a later date with someone far smarter to talk to, or even go back to Dr. Anna at the beginning, is policy is often built around an attempt to support mum in caring for baby, not looking at what's the best for baby and the best for that baby to grow up to then parent their kids. It's not looking at it generationally, and it's not looking at the end recipient, wrapping the care and policy around that. It's doing it around a person because of some old social concepts.
When Chris talks about speaking to people more smart, he means smarter than the two of us, not our guests, who are incredibly smart, which is why we've got them on in the first place. So yeah, well, workplace, I mean, there's always stuff you can say about workplace, but we've covered it so much on the previous episodes that we will skip on to healthcare. And I actually feel like we've spoke about some of this before as well, but it's always worth just diving back into. So the three things that I've got listed under healthcare and pregnancy is antenatal appointments and birth plans. So they often exclude dads or treat them as optional guests rather than equal partners. So I suppose the key point on that to start with, if we look at antenatal appointments, is that dads aren't specifically invited to those. So we go along because we want to, and we're invested, obviously, but actually the NHS doesn't invite us to those appointments. You've then got hospital communication. So whether that's postnatal care, discharge instructions, always directed towards the mother and not both parents. And then also mums are listed as the main contact for doctors, nurseries, even when dads are involved. And I'll go back to this one that I know I've already mentioned before, but when my daughter, when 111 told us to go to the urgent treatment centre back in February, when I got there, it was like, oh, is it phone number ending in so for mum? And I was like, well, yes. I mean, actually, what I first said was, well, let me check my phone because I don't actually know my wife's number off by heart. I was like, I don't think people know numbers off by heart anymore.
I do. I have this one with my wife often is she knows her mum's one off by heart, but she doesn't know mine, but I do know hers.
Yeah, we don't know each other's numbers. But then, like, she's top of my favourites list, so I just hit her name on the favourites list, so I don't need to know the number, do I? Some people might argue with that, but there we go. But so they were like, "Oh, is it number so?" I can make numbers up because I don't know it. 635 for mum, and I was like, "Oh yes, it is." So that was the first instance of, oh, like dad's here. That's strange. Then, and I must say, although otherwise they were brilliant. Then when we went through, got seen straight away, which was excellent. Loved that. But all the questions were around, it was like midnight or something. It was Super Bowl night. I know that because I just settled in when 111 called and said you need to go. So I was like, okay. But the first thing was, oh, where's mum? I was like, well, she's at home sleeping, hopefully. She was awake and now she's not. She's hopefully at home sleeping. Do you have any other children? I was like, yes, I have a son as well. Where is he? I was like, well, he's at home with mum. But it was all very accusatory, all like, oh, why is dad here? This is really strange. We weren't expecting you to be here. And I was like, what? Weren't expecting that I'm concerned about my daughter's health. It's like really, really bizarre. So yeah, so that's my main one around healthcare. But I suppose we've also talked about, health visitors, never asked me about how I was doing, my health, my mental health. Did I need any support when I was sat there in my own living room with them? So again, just so many instances. It's like, oh, dad, you're here. Okay, fine. Let's deal with you.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It's not kind of built around a parenting unit. It's still built around this primary, secondary caregiver model. And the bit I always reflect on is, because I'm very kind of logical procedural, is on like the record keeping. I think is such a clear example of the heart of the issue, and also something that'd be incredibly easy to actually rectify and make that symbolic gesture actually something that, right at the very beginning sets that tone. And I still remember we've still got little keepsakes. I've still got the little band of my eldest, and it's in my wife's maiden name. We were married at this point, but it's in the maiden name because the records hadn't managed to change, and that whole palaver of changing names around. So it's technically it's in complete the wrong name. And then we had also to show why the name was being done at the registration and certificate. And yeah, I mean that was all fun because I actually took my mother's name. That's what we agreed between my wife and I, for personal reasons and but it was a very weird one because we're like, why have you done this? As if it was something that needed interrogating again. But yeah, just that bit of, right at the very beginning, there was no attempt to just go, okay, that's your choice. It was, we've got this, we're restricted to do it in a certain way because this is the way it's always been. This is the way we always will do it unless something drastic shifts. I remember that one a lot.
I've just got up out of my seat and gone and found these personal child health records in the filing cabinet. I say filing cabinet. It's actually a very nice bookcase from Dunelm. But I've just gone to look at both of them, and my wife's name is in both of them. The children's names are in them, obviously, but there is no mention of me anywhere in the contacts areas. So that's another example of where mum is the default.
And you were like me, I think a lot of dads, a lot of ones we've spoken to anecdotally in our groups and wider, the Red Book's kind of where you live because it is the record. It's the one bit that you can kind of take charge of, and you can track the measurements on the charts. You can go very kind of stereotypical dad, one wife going, well, I'm gonna learn and make sure I know if everything's on track. And that's, it is the big document that you take charge of a lot of the times. But again, there's no record onto that of, that and Jeremy speaks about this, and, for more information on bits like this, do go and look at the great materials on the Fathercraft site. It's also true, but also on the Fatherhood Institute's website about bits like this. And because again, that's all wrapped in this whole idea of the kind of shift in terms of if we're not expecting, and I use that word purposely, if we're not expecting new and expectant dads to be an equal by default, the only result of that is a perpetuation of this one of making and forcing mums to be by default.
So we've done workplace, we've done health, education now. So we've already talked about how when my son had earache, how they called my wife in the first instance. I should say then that actually throughout, although this perhaps misses the point, throughout the rest of that scenario over the next kind of 48 hours, I was then the person they called. But the fact is, in the first instance, they called her. A lot of the messages from school actually go to her. In fact, when they set up, we've got an app that we use that the school used to send messages.
I was going to ask you about that because that happens with me as well. It's like
it was automatically set up in my wife's name. And, you know, if it's only set up in one parent's name, fine. I suppose it's 50-50, but it feels like, oh, of course they put the mum down. It's just, it's an odd one.
it's the structural bits. It's that structural bit again of, there's no good logical reason why when they ask for an emergency contact, you only have to give one parent. There's no good logical reason why on a comms list and like the change, like the emergency ones you learn about, like rained off days, school closures, that kind of thing, trip information, all this kind of stuff. There's no good reason why only one parent should be on that list. It doesn't make it any technically more difficult. It doesn't make it any more expensive, at least not in any way that matters. And it's just, again, it's that one that goes, either you're in a place where you have to choose one to give, and sometimes that's just on who's doing the drop-off at that point, or they choose for you, and they default, in most cases, to mums. And it's just that one of, it doesn't take much to unpick some of these systemic things to start making an actual real shift.
Well, let's talk about cultural assumptions and stereotypes then. So on my list, I have mum guilt being normalised, while dad struggles are downplayed or ignored. Dads being praised for doing basic parenting, while mums are expected to handle everything without recognition. And linked to that, dads often being seen as babysitters and not equally responsible parents. That's the one that really bugs me, actually, is when people are like surprised or impressed when like I do, like my mother-in-law is away on holiday the next 2 weeks, so I'm taking the day off on the days that they would have usually had her, and it's like the reaction I get for that is like, oh, you're taking the day, oh, that's so amazing, like, and it's like, well, no, it's just what I need to do. Would you tell my wife that she was so amazing if she was taking the day off? No, you wouldn't. You just like be like, oh, right, whatever. But you're doing something really basic. That's amazing. What a great dad you are. No, it's what I should be doing. It's just basic parenting. I'm not doing anything special. It's just absolutely, it really, really bugs me.
I remember that in the same kind of way of, I took my eldest one to rugby tots once on a Saturday, and they were like, oh, so you take him for the whole morning? I was like, well, yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get there. It's a couple of hours. Then we, there's the kind of bring them away, that slow peel away where you're saying goodbyes and catching up. And then they can be back and say, yeah, it's the whole morning. It's like, is your wife okay with that? I don't understand your question. And they just look confused at you. It's like, is she okay with you? Again, I'm not understanding your question. We have 2 kids. It gives a one-on-one time with our youngest. It's like, I'm not sure what you're trying to get. Are you trying to get at the fact is, does she trust you to go do it? So, well, why wouldn't she? It's this weird reaction that you get to things like that. They were even more shocked when we used to, until we kind of changed most ways, we used to take him to gymnastics. Well, he's a very mobile child. He was just thinking like parkour might be a substitute for us. He's now getting older. He's almost 4, so he's almost old enough to join it. And I'm not sure if you got video one on this, but if you saw Paul's face on that, you'd know. It's about my eldest.
As long as he doesn't get into extreme parkour. Like my Instagram suggested videos at the moment are often people like climbing up buildings because
he's already doing that,
and then you get bombarded with it all. But
yeah, but that was the thing, and they were like, they had that double reaction. One of, you're looking after them for the morning. And so, well, of course I am. And the other one being, you're okay with your son going to a gymnastics class. I was like, you've quite clearly never been to one of these classes. It's more structured soft play than anything else. It's like, but also, why would that matter?
Next up on cultural assumptions and stereotypes, I had media representation, usually centering around mum in parenting roles. Is that still the case?
That's done a lot of change on that. Actually, the one that actually annoys me more in that anything else is children's books. I don't know if I'm the only one that notices, but like one of my eldest's favourite at the moment is called, it's about Pip the Penguin. And when you look at Pip the Penguin, it's a nice one story, but there you go. It's about this one of, Pip is a small penguin and he's scared of going in the water, so he doesn't want to learn to swim. And it's all about him overcoming that and having the bravery to be able to go in. But in that, the dad is portrayed as basically dismissing his child's want of going in. It's like, don't be silly, all penguins should swim. And then that's all the dad has. In that entire book, that's what the dad does. And the mum says, no, be nice to him, dear. It's like, he might be afraid, let's reshape it. But it's always, so many kids' books I've noticed at the moment, always have the kind of the emotional protagonist as being the mum. Apart from things, because in media you get things like Bluey. Bluey's amazing. Not only is it actually okay to watch, it's quite funny, but the whole premise is a dad who's looking after his two girls. Being present, playing,
By the way, I only recently found out that
the movie
Bluey was a girl.
Oh no!
I didn't know whether Bluey was a boy or a girl, but so I've only just I haven't watched a lot of it. We don't watch a lot of it in this house.
I'll say you must not have known it as much because
no, we don't really watch it. So
I thought you were about to say you weren't aware there's a Bluey movie coming up, and
I wasn't aware of that either. No.
Like getting into Paw Patrol is one of those.
However, if you want to go back to books about penguins, like there is actually a very lovely story about I don't know if it's a baby penguin or just a child penguin, but who has two dads, and that is a lovely story. So if you want a positive penguin story, go get that one. Just also, this is really off topic, but literally just because I was talking to someone about Friday Night Lights, literally like yesterday, if you want an example of amazing parents, strong mum, strong dad, equal parents, great couple, Coach Taylor and Tammy in Friday Night Lights. My God.
You're not
couple
wrong.
Goals.
You find out actually that's where most really good representations of masculinity in particular are shown. It's often in sports related stories, whether they be real life or fictional. Go back through your old children's books, just have a look with that kind of lens, and you'd be surprised with how many are set up in this same kind of fashion. If you have something as strong as media, as constant as media, as your primary, not necessarily role model, but your primary perception of something, then, if the storybooks all have a similar line, if the shows all have a similar line, if the messaging all has a similar line, we can't be surprised when the outcome reflects that input.
Okay, so cultural assumptions done. Final one on here is consumer products and services. I've got 3 points in here. So parenting products being marketed to women and not men. And so I've got like baby books, changing bags. Although on the changing bags, dads, get the official dad bag. It is a changing bag for dads. It is cool. It is stylish. This is not an ad. But we met Nathan at the baby show, and I've tried it out, and it is excellent.
Also, a lovely couple.
Yes,
him and his wife are just the loveliest people you'd meet, and they did it for all the right reasons. So, support that.
Yeah, Nathan's been helping out the comms team at my day job with some stuff recently, which is really great of him. But in general, parenting products still marketed to it, and we know this because actually, when we were at the baby show, apart from us, apart from Nathan, and apart from Dad Ventures, and obviously there was a dad's panel as well, but outside of that, absolutely everything there was explicitly targeted towards mums. Every time a couple walked past us, like the woman would essentially turn around to her partner and be like, "Oh, look, something for you."
So many mums.
Was like, "Yes, something for you. Come and talk to us." So there's the product part of it being marketed at women rather than dads. There's one actually that this is really frustrating as well. I don't think most places I go, this isn't such an issue actually, because most places I go do have these facilities separate. But men's bathrooms lacking baby changing facilities. When that does occur, that is a really frustrating one. I can't remember which airport it was, but there was an airport I was in. I don't know whether it was Stansted or East Midlands, but there was an airport I was in the past couple of years where actually the baby changing facilities in the men's toilets, what it was that someone had pushed a trolley through and put like a makeshift changing mat on the top of it, and it was on wheels as well. So it was awful. It was not really safe, and it was just absolutely shocking. So
That is bad.
let's put baby changing facilities in all men's bathrooms, please.
That one annoys the hell out of me. On airport ones, actually, Gatwick is good. They actually have facilities in the men's as well, which is nice. That one definitely annoys me. In this regard, there's only really one, apart from the changing facilities in bathrooms, that gets me. And that is, if you've ever signed up to like the new baby boxes or things, the content of those, absolutely everything, all of it in that box, to a fault, is aimed at mum. There's never a box where it goes, hey, it's a new dad box. Self-care might be something you want to do as well.
I love a bit of self-care. We do face mask Fridays, and I used to do it with a glass of wine. Don't really drink at the weekends anymore, which makes it sound like I drink in the week. I don't. I just don't really drink anymore. But I used to love a glass of red wine and a face mask on a Friday night. Love it.
But it's shared moments. But
yeah,
I mean, if it had that, I just went, look, here's a couples kit for you, plus some extra bits.
Oh my, we would love that.
Neighbour specific. That'd be great. But also, that would be really good at setting the framework, being that you are in this together. Also, you should make sure you spend time together, and there's nothing better than helping each other look after yourself and each other. That would be such a great precedent. And again, it's just one of those things of this makes it sound maybe a little bit bad when you kind of link it all together, but again, it's that one of what the dad shift is doing. And I can't remember if we said today, but I'm going to re-say it now, is on Wednesday the 11th of June is when it takes place. But it's all that idea one of, I think their name was really apt, this kind of dad shift. It's a shift in expectations of dad, it's a shift in their expectations of themselves, it's a shift in support, it's a shift in recognition, shift in attitude, it's a shift in everything. But fundamentally, the one that benefits is the two groups who have had it most difficult in this part. It's the child themselves who benefits, and also it's mothers who have always previously been expected to burden it primarily by themselves, and that emotional and mental workload as well. So yeah, it's just one of those bits of, there's no really good reason why oversight's there. These are small things that make together a massive difference.
Yeah. I mean, everything we've talked about today, this imbalance that exists has real consequences, not just for dads, but for mothers who are burdened with default responsibility, and for children who miss out on the full presence of their parents. So, addressing inequality means changing systems, yes, but also challenging the everyday assumptions that keep dads on the sidelines. So let's jump into that interview now. Like Chris said, the dad strike itself is happening on Wednesday, the 11th of June. Alex explains what it is. I mean, I would usually be, and I will be, doing the school run that day anyway. But as I say at the end of the interview with Alex, I'm going to do it with intent. And I'm going to talk to everyone who I see on the school gate about dad shift, about the dad strike, and just raise awareness of this really important issue as well.
And I think that's a really big thing to take away from it. It's like with the parenting out loud movement is the way you start to be that change, to borrow the old Gandhi phrase, is by showing up, by doing it, and by doing it, you give others permission to do the same. So, if you are doing a loud and proud school run, the quiet dad doing it may be a loud and proud school run afterwards, and then dominoes start to fall. So it's not okay to complain about it all the time. You kind of have to want to get involved and then make yourself present and then bring people with you. So full credit to Alex and the team, because that is exactly what they've done.
It is indeed. So without further ado, here's that interview. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. Can you just introduce yourself for the listeners, please?
Sure, I'm Alex Lloyd Hunter. I am co-founder of the Dad Shift campaign for better paternity leave.
And we want to talk about the dad shift a lot today, but I thought just to start with, it'd be great to hear about your own experiences of fatherhood, becoming a parent for the first time, what those experiences were like, whether that was at all impacted by your own upbringing, how you experienced your relationship with your own parents.
Sure. So I've got a son who's 3. My wife's actually pregnant with another one who's due in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We're very excited. Although she's been very unlucky with morning sickness. She's basically had wall-to-wall morning sickness throughout. She's week 28. She still has it. And she's pretty much wiped out by it. So it's not been much fun for her, but we're very excited. So we had our first son beginning of 2022. We had a pretty long road to becoming parents. We struggled to get pregnant, and in the end had to do IVF and went through that during COVID. And that was a pretty rough time and experience, but I always feel gave us an extra level of resilience when our son was arrived. And we've been through a lot of difficult stuff to get here, and now it somehow made it feel a little bit easier when you're in the tough moments. And same for our second, we've done IVF again. And my experience becoming a father, it was something that because it took us years to get there, was something I had a lot of time to prepare for. And I always knew that I wanted to be a very hands-on dad. I wanted to make being a dad a massive part of my life, and a big part of how I get fulfillment. And that's something I've always felt strongly, because growing up I felt very clearly my dad didn't get that. Obviously, a man of his generation, there was no paternity leave. He went back to work 12 hours after my brother was born on Sunday night. And he worked long hours in a busy, demanding, stressful job. Didn't really see us most of the week. Didn't really play much of a role in looking after us. And as a result, ended up on the kind of periphery of the family. Never really bonded that strongly with us. It contributed to the breakdown of his own marriage. And we have a much stronger relationship now. As adults, he's a very soppy grandparent to my son. And it gave us a lens to start talking about how that was for him, how he feels about not having that. And he really feels he missed out. And I think so many men do. And part of the reason I wanted to start campaigning about paternity leave and making it easier for fathers to be more involved in their kids' lives is I think that experience is still too common. Even though our values as a society have changed, our systems that are in place that block fathers from being more involved are still there. And it's still far too common for kids to grow up not really having that close bond with their father, and that's awful for everyone.
Yeah, we spoke to Professor Anna Tarrant from the Centre for Innovation in Fatherhood and Family Research, and she'd done some work specifically with grandfathers. She'd spoken to her own grandfather, but also a wider group of men who were having different experiences now as grandfathers, as opposed to back when they had their own children. And it was really interesting hearing about, how they, upon reflection, yes, it was a different time, but wish things had been different in their day. And that actually they felt that great that they were managing to have this relationship now with their grandchildren, but actually they'd really missed out when they had their own kids.
That's really interesting. We see that in the polling data we've got. You see these trends of asking questions like, is it good when both parents can be involved in childcare? As the older and older people get, the more they agree with that, which is not necessarily what you would expect, because as you say, it would have been very different when they were parents. But I think older people have that wisdom and distance to realize actually that was the most important part of my life. And now I feel like I missed it, and I regret that. And I'm very determined that we don't have another generation and generations to come of fathers growing up feeling the same thing.
So you knew you wanted to be a hands-on father. You had a lot of time to kind of plan for that. How did that manifest itself when your son came along? What did What did those first few months look like?
So the planning I did beforehand was kind of getting the question a lot of people ask is, how did you adjust to being a dad? And what I would say is actually I did most of the adjustment beforehand because we had this long lead-in time. So for me, a lot of that was recognizing that I was in a very, similarly to my dad, very stressful job that I worked hard at, that occupied my brain 24/7. And I knew if I can't change how I am working, how I'm living, I will not be able to be as present for my son, paternity leave or not, whatever else, I won't be able to be present in the way I wanted to be. So I sort of shifted that, which took a while. So in a way, the delay was helpful. It's one silver lining to it. And then when my son arrived, I think like a lot of fathers, remember feeling that anxiety of, am I going to bond with him? Am I going to find this easy or natural? I always felt like when I was a teenager, I was like, I was convinced that if I walked past a baby, they'd start crying. I was very awkward around kids. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to hold them. I didn't know how to play with them. And I remember, this is not every father's experience. It's very common that this is not the experience, but the moment I held my son, I was completely bonded and in love with him. And I was lucky I had 6 weeks paternity leave. I was working for myself, so I set the company policy. So useful. I got 6 weeks full pay. Yes, nice benefit. We'd have loved to have done more, but small company, that's all we could afford. And it was a really incredible 6 weeks, like very difficult because our son wasn't feeding properly and he wouldn't go in his cot. Like he slept on one of us 24 hours a day. So I just remember staying up with him all night watching like Game of Thrones or something whilst he was sleeping in my chest. So like it was difficult, but also just incredible to have that time. And I just remember thinking, I don't know how people go back after 2 weeks. How would you do that?
Yeah, I have no idea. When my son was born in the first few months of the pandemic, and so I was on a fixed term contract at the time, and so I just got the 2 weeks. Though I was at home all the time because of being locked down, but I don't know that actually that made it any better because of the circumstances. But when my daughter was born, she's 18 months now, I took the 2 weeks. Actually, where I work, we have a shared parental leave, which I'm not a huge fan of in its current form anyway, but they do offer 6 months full pay, but obviously that's dependent on the mother wanting to give up maternity leave, and my wife didn't. So I took the 2 weeks. I then took another 3 weeks annual leave because we have generous annual leave. So, but I had an amazing time during those 5 weeks. But even after those 5 weeks, going back, it didn't feel like it was enough.
Yeah, it's hard.
And also, when I went back into work, I wasn't really prepared for it. Even after 5 weeks, it felt like I'd been away for much longer. Even though the time with my daughter felt short, the time away from work felt quite significant, and I struggled to try and get back into it. I was like, right, what am I doing? How do I get into this? So, and I work from home a lot as well. So actually, you might have thought it might have been easier, but yeah, I found it quite difficult to transition back into work.
Yeah, same. Likewise, even after 6 weeks, I remember starting back, and whilst I was off, a bunch of people had joined the company. I was technically meant to be their boss or managing, and this sort of first call I had with them, there was a point where I was speaking and I was so tired, my brain just suddenly stopped producing words, like mid-sentence. I just stopped being able to speak and sort of sat there in silence for a few seconds, and all of them looking at me like, okay, is this guy all right? And I was just so exhausted. And then, yeah, as you say, that was even after 6 weeks, even be able to work from home because, we're still kind of post-lockdown. Precautions, like it's tough. So how people do it after 2 weeks or even less, a lot of self-employed people in particular, some people take no time at all because they don't go to work, they don't get paid, and they can't afford it, and it costs you $1,000 if you're on an average salary. It costs you $1,000 to take your 2 weeks. So it's just prehistoric, the situation we have compared to other countries.
Yeah, it's really bad. I actually wrote my master's dissertation on this.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yes, it was a cross-national policy analysis on the impact of enhanced parental and paternity leave on gender equality and childhood development. But when you look at us against other countries, there's an OECD analysis that I know that the Fatherhood Institute have used before that actually ranks us something like 40th or 41st out of 43 countries in terms of full-time equivalent salary. And actually the only countries below us don't provide any, which I think is Israel, the United States, and
New Zealand.
Australia. Yeah, so it really is bad, and you look elsewhere where they've implemented these enhanced policies and systems, and the benefits are clear, both in terms of gender equality, in terms of childhood development. Why do you think we're still lagging behind so much?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get asked this a lot because it is surprising in many ways. I did a interview with Catalan TV bizarrely a few months ago, and they wanted to interview me outside Parliament, and they were setting everything up, and I said to the presenter, like, why are you interested in this? Like, why on earth are people in Barcelona interested in our paternity leave? She said, oh, well, it's interesting because we always thought the UK was a progressive country, and then we found out about your paternity leave. And it is, it's not aligned with how we see ourselves and how we probably think of ourselves as quite forward thinking when it comes to social issues and gender equality and so on. And yet we have the worst paternity leave in the whole of Europe, which is 2 weeks, paid at less than half minimum wage, nothing if you're self-employed. I think it hasn't changed, not because our values haven't changed. This isn't an issue of kind of public buy-in. This is an issue of political inaction, basically. And I think the previous government, this was not something that was high on their agenda. They brought in shared parental leave. That was their attempt at the solution. It clearly hasn't worked. Less than 2% of people use it. That's because it's so poorly paid. Hardly anyone can afford it. And actually the data, we did some research, and those who do take it overwhelmingly at the top of the income bracket, something like less than 100 people a year in the bottom third of earners take it. It's almost no one. And as in your situation, it requires mothers to give up maternity leave. And all the evidence from other countries who've tried the same thing is that that doesn't work. A lot of other places brought in shared parental leave first. It didn't work because that's a really hard barrier to get over, understandably. You need the dedicated proper paternity leave. So I think it's a political inaction problem, and we are pleased that this government recognised the system isn't working. They put it in their manifesto that it wasn't working, that they're going to review parental leave this summer. And we just hope that they take that opportunity to take steps towards catching up with the rest of Europe. We don't have to be the best in Europe. That's going to take time, but we just need to get on the playing field because we are miles behind at the moment.
So you've co-founded the Dad Shift, and you're focusing on the paternity leave issue. Obviously, it's something you're passionate about as a father. There's lots of things that many of us are passionate about. And obviously you've got a background in campaigning as well, but what was it about this that you thought, actually, I need to be the one that does something about this?
I don't think I ever thought it specifically needs to be me that does this. And there's like a group of us who work on this. And I was very fortunate that as I was starting to think about this is something I want to work on, I was put in touch with particularly George, who's the co-founder with me, who was thinking very similar things, and a group of others who volunteered, who helped brought it into existence. So it's very much not just me. The reason I cared about this specifically and became passionate about this specifically was, I think as a lot of people with small children, this is one of the biggest things in my life at the moment. And when we became parents, we had this goal of trying to do everything as equally as possible so I could be really involved. So my wife could carry on in her career. And we are very lucky that we made it possible. But I saw in the process all the jigsaw places that had to be in place for us to do that. Like, we have to both be able to work in a way that is flexible. So my wife has a good employer who likes to work flexibly. I work for myself so I can work flexibly. We have to be able to earn enough so that we could each take a day off a week to do childcare. We have 3 sets of grandparents who live in half an hour to be able to cover the rest of the childcare, because if not, full-time childcare can cost you 20 grand, 25 grand a year. And, if any one of those things have fallen out, then inevitably the onus to be the primary parent would have fallen on my wife, and I would have been forced to step back. And that's what happens in so many couples. And it was like seeing that and realizing that system is still out there, and then looking at work that the organizations like Pregnant and Screwed have been doing, when they've been campaigning on this for years, mobilizing mothers, but there weren't really any organizations trying to mobilize fathers at scale to say, look, this is something we want to, this is something we are passionate about. And that was a hole that I felt made it less likely we'd get what we want, but also meant that we were basically leaving it to mums to sort this out for us, which doesn't sit quite right. It's not their problem to solve. We need to step up and help. So that's why I honed in on this as something that I wanted to do.
And it feels like you really came to public attention with a big bang. It like obviously, one day something isn't there and not it's next, but it's literally felt like overnight you were right there, out and centre in the news. Everyone was talking about it with the baby sling stunt, which was amazing. Was that quite overwhelming? And actually, how did that idea come about in the first place?
Yes, it was very overwhelming. That was George. George came up with that idea, and he was inspired by something Greenpeace had done, where they went around London and put gas masks on statues a few years ago. They got a massive one and put it on the statue of Nelson, which we definitely weren't going to do. That is very high, and Greenpeace are good at climbing things, and I am very much not good at climbing things. Pregnant Then Screwed also did a similar stunt about a year beforehand. They went to a beach in Corby and put some baby slings on Anthony Gormley statues there. So yeah, that's where the idea came from George, and the response was incredible. We had this idea of, in public, men are always portrayed as their careers, right? Women are always asked about their family and their kids, but men, it's your job. And we was actually, these men are footballers, they are artists, they are engineers, but also they're dads. And we want to have that duality in their identity and recognize that the importance that part of their lives plays in society. And yeah, the response was amazing. I think people really connected with the kind of visual stories. They're quite funny. Also, there's a degree of novelty of like, oh, dads talking about wanting to be with their babies, fancy that, which is obviously part of what we're trying to change. But yeah, it was both amazing and wild. It's a huge influx of kind of attention and interest. I had booked the world's worst timed holiday for 2 days after we launched. So I was trying to manage all this from Portugal, which in some ways was nice, but in other ways, sort of go to the beach in the day and then stay up until 1 a.m. trying to manage Instagram. And so yeah, but it was great, and it helped us leap forward in the campaign. Yeah, we very quickly built a big online supporter base. There were parents across the country just sort of waiting for that door to be open, and they've rushed through. We built a big political supporter base. We have around 35 Labour MPs who are actively working with us on the campaign, most of whom came in right at the beginning around that moment. So it was a huge help, and has given us a really strong platform to build on.
Yeah. And you've just done another stunt with Baby Grows, which has also had a huge impact. And then coming up in June, so I mean, we're talking a bit before, but this is going to come out just a few days before the dad strike. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yes. So on the 11th of June, we are doing the world's first ever dad strike. So how that's going to work is we're getting dads and non-birthing parents, mums and kids are also welcome, all across the country to either picket or pick up. So you're going to ask your employer for the time off. We're not actually going on strike. We don't want anyone to get fired. You're just going to book the time off for annual leave, or ask the employer for a few hours, your employer for a few hours. And you're going to picket or pick up. Picket, either join a family-friendly picket outside the Department of Business and Trade in London or the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, or you just go and make a point of doing the school pickup, because we know that over half of kids never get picked up from school from their dads. It's one of those kind of emblematic things that dads miss out on because of the fact that we end up back at work so soon and taking on the role of breadwinner, where our partners are often forced into the role of homemaker. So we're trying to get everyone together on this day, or to do the school pickup. And you can, if you're interested in taking part, which kind of make it as big as possible so the government can't ignore it, you can go to dadstrike.com to sign up.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I would be doing the school pickup on that day every day, but I will perhaps get a T-shirt printed or something to make a point.
Do it with intent.
About it, and do it with intent as well. Obviously, you're trying to change government policy in the long term. How hopeful are you that in the review of paternity leave, parental leave that the government have said they're going to do, obviously it's not going to be part of this employment rights bill, but how hopeful are you that actually we might see some change?
I'm hopeful. I don't think the current situation is sustainable. It's just not sustainable for us to be the worst in Europe. And we're structuring a campaign around these moments every 4 to 6 weeks where we're exposing a different way in which the system is currently failing. and there's just too many to choose between. The one we've just done around the baby growth stunt that you mentioned, the point of that was highlighting some research we did with Movember that found that 45% of new dads experience multiple symptoms of postnatal depression in the first year. And 82% of them say, lo and behold, the best thing the government could do to fix that is better paternity leave. Because if you're pushed back after 2 weeks into this pressure cooker of trying to keep the family afloat financially, keeping up with your boss's demands as if nothing has changed, but you're completely sleep deprived and your world's been turned upside down, and you're trying to be there, be present, support your partner, be a good dad, bond with your child, like this huge amount of pressure that faces new fathers and non-birthing parents. And we are paying the price of our mental health. So that is one example of how this is not sustainable. When it comes to the politics of it, we believe the government are pretty sympathetic to our view. They themselves recognise parental leave is not working at the moment. Where the rub will be is because it's statutory, we're suggesting that the government should continue to pay for it as they do now. The economy is not doing so well. They talk about that a lot. And that is where what we've got to land is that this is something that's very good for growth. In fact, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation recently did some modelling that showed 6 weeks paternity leave at 90% pay would generate £2.6 billion of growth for the economy, but only cost the government about £200 million. And the reason for that is that what it does, all the evidence from other countries, is that better paternity leave helps mothers who want to take on more paid work longer term, because things are a little bit more equal at home. For whatever reason, they say, okay, yeah, I'll do a bit more paid work, not during their maternity leave, but longer term. And that boosts the economy. They also end up paying tax on the income they earn, which means it doesn't cost the government so much. And so it's a really positive thing. It's basic economic infrastructure. We think that's what we need to get over the line to give government the confidence to take action on this. But I am optimistic. I think it's winnable.
And beyond policy change, do you think that, can you see that the work you're doing, but also others like, Pregnant Then Screwed, the Fatherhood Institute and others, do you think that that's the work you're doing is really influencing societal perceptions of fatherhood as well? Do you see that impact through the work that you're all collectively doing?
I think it's part of it. It's hard to obviously link direct impact one way or another to what we are doing. But what we do know is that policy change, like paternity leave, drives societal change. You see that very, very clearly in other countries. So in Iceland, for example, they brought in 3 months of paternity leave back in 2000. It was very generous at the time, the best in the world. And there have been studies, because that's now been 25 years, there have been studies about what's happened. And what you saw is that very, very quickly, within a decade, childcare was much more equally shared long term. You even got couples getting less likely to get divorced. So if you got married in 1999, the year before, you were still more likely to have got divorced 15 years later than if you got married the year after. And you see that in other countries, that the policy changes and then the societal change comes in afterwards. It's very hard for societal change to happen if you've got these big system barriers in the way that stop people behaving in the way they want, and that reinforces itself. So, outside of that, I think there is a value to lots of fathers publicly standing up and saying, I want to be more involved, because it gives that permission space for others who feel the same way to express that, and then people see it and they realize that's the reality of what this generation of parents wants. We had 90% of fathers in polling we've done agree that these days fathers want to be a bigger part of their kids' lives, but we're stopping them doing that. And I think there is value to publicly saying, look, this is what we think, this is what we want.
And post dad strike, what else is in the works? Have you got any other big plans to inspire people into action?
I'm sure we'll have something. There's always something coming up. The big focus is going to be the review the government's doing. So they're due to start this summer. Everything we're going to pile into that, because we need the outcome of that to be a conclusion that, yes, paternity leave is not good enough, we're going to improve it. So whatever we do, it's going to be aimed at influencing that.
We'll put all the information in the show notes, and we'll also let people know how they can get involved in the dad strike on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep up the good work. We're all behind you. It's really important work. And hopefully if we were to talk again in a year or so, we might be talking about how there's really significant and important change coming down the track. So
that would be nice.
Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And that's our show for today. Father's Ed is produced by Gemma Lothian, Chris Marchant and Paul Rhodes. It's edited by Paul Rhodes. Our music is by Christos Politis. You can find information, guidance and support on our website, fathercraft.co.uk. That's also where you can sign up to our Father's Ed platform, read our blog and find product reviews. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating so other dads can find us. It really does help. Thanks for listening.